Hello everyone, in this tutorial we'll take a look at how to do something like this. So, to do all of this you need to have enabled all of your chaos plugins because this is chaos fracture. So you need to have enabled chaos solver, chaos caching, and the chaos editor tools. Once all of those are enabled, you should have a new mode called fracture. So let's jump off this sequencer and let's replicate everything here on the side. So we'll do the same thing or something similar. So let's go to modeling tools. Let's bring a box in. Something like this should suffice. It's obviously the modeling tools remember your previous box creation. So this one, in this case, it's like this. So now that we have our box, we need to go into fracture mode. Now we'll make a deeper dive on fracture on another tutorial, but for this one I'm just going to create a very simple geometry collection, then we'll fracture it, and then that will be it. So in the fracture mode, from the top down we have generate, and then we need to click new. This will create a new geometry collection, which is what we are going to be fracturing. We're not going to fracture the static mesh itself, we are going to fracture its geo collection. In this case, I'll simply create a cluster destruction or fracture by clicking on this. If you want to play around with all the values, they are all in here, which are very, very fun to play with. The explode amount will only work once we fracture once. But then again, number of clusters, one of the more easier ones to modify. So I'm just going to set it to 30. Again, just play around with these. We'll make a bigger video on chaos fracture. In this one, we're just going to go for a simple one level fracture. And that is going to be it. We're going to switch back to selection, and now we have this. Now this guy is showing something called bone colors. So I could turn off by selecting the geo collection, show bone colors, and that's going to switch back to its original material. Now we saw that the other one has two different materials. So before we continue on, let's jump back into fracture mode and let's go all the way down to material. Now material is one of the tools that this mode has. And then in here, we have the ability to assign different materials. In this case, we only have one slot. So for this slot, what I'll do is I'll find my plaster collection materials here, material pack, and then we're going to go into material. And I am simply going to choose one of these to apply to my bigger material. That's going to apply to everything. Now, the one thing that this doesn't do is we need to apply a different material to internal faces. And since we only have one slot, we can't do that right now. So what we'll do is we'll add a material slot. We're going to bring a different material into that. And with that index 1 material down here in assign materials selected, so we're going to switch it to index 1, only internal faces, making sure that only select bones is disabled, so it applies to everything. We're going to assign materials. And now that we've done that, if we check the explode amount, we're going to see that the material inside is different from the material outside. So that's perfect. We're going to set back the explode amount to 0, hopefully. There we go. Explode amount back to 0. Let's go back to selection mode and let's continue on working on our project. So what we need to do now is we're going to bring our character over here. So we're going to have him run. And what we'll do is we are going to add an animation to him in sequencer. So let's create a new sequencer. And we are going to go to cinematics. We're going to open up this sequencer. And what we'll do is we'll bring him on. Control A to add a character. And we're going to select, in this case, a jog forward animation that I have. I am in the other one, I had an animation adding the arms up. We're not going to do that here. We're just going to make this one fast and furious, so we don't make a super long tutorial. So what we need to do now is make sure that this is working. So first and foremost, we're going to simulate. We're just going to drop it in the air first before we simulate and see what happens. Perfect. It is actually falling and breaking. Now, we don't want that to happen. What we want to happen is we're going to send this down to 0. What we want to happen is our character to kind of interact with the wall through something called a master field. Now, to access master fields, we need to make sure that the settings and show engine content and show plugin content both are enabled. So once we have that, what we need to do is bring in our all, we can search for something called master, and then we type field, and then this is what we're going to get. What this does is bring in this sphere. Again, we're going to talk more about this on a future video, delving a deep dive into fracture, but essentially what they do is that they apply radial or directional force into a geometry collection, and then that is what applies that destruction. So what we need to do is assign this master field to follow our character, and we'll do that by bringing it into sequencer and then creating an attach track. In this case, I'll go for attach, and then we are going to select our character here. I'm simply going to select the head. Remember that every time we do an attach track, we need to set the values to 0 on the transform and location of our asset. In this case, we're going to simply do this. We are going to simulate, nothing happens to the wall, but as this moves forward, nothing happens still because we forgot one little detail. The activation mode of our field needs here in the details panel on the below the outliner, the activation mode needs to be set up to on tech. That means that it will constantly be pulsing. So if we simulate now and we do this, this is what we get. So we're getting close, but there's one more detail that I want to showcase here, and that is another field called the anchor field. Now these guys are very, very cool, and you see them in the other example back there. What these guys do is make sure that whatever leaf bones, so the small little colored sections of this fracture that are within the volume, do not get moved. These essentially are, as the name says, anchoring. And to utilize these anchors, first we need to set them up, and then once we click on our geo collection, and if we scroll down a little bit, we have initialization fields here. And what we need to do is add 2 of these, and with the pick actor from the scene, select both anchors. Now we simulate, now we hit play, and now you see that the walls are stuck. Now, this is great, but this is always simulating, and we may not want something like this in sequencer, because we want probably to have full control of this in sequencer and not have the Unreal Engine simulate every single time. So what we'll do is the final step today, and we'll finally add something very cool at the end, which is called the Time Dilation track. But before that, we need to cache all this information. So to do that, with our geometry collection selected, we are going to go to Actor, Chaos, Create Cache Manager. It's going to ask us where do we want to create it. You guys save it wherever you see it fit. And now that we have it here in the world, it doesn't matter where it is. What we need to do is check that in the details panel, this is actually aiming to our geometry collection, which is this one, perfectly fine. And then the cache mode is set to record. So now we'll simulate once with the cache mode set to record. And we'll stop here. We're going to decide to stop when we want it to. And now this cache manager can be switched off to static pose. And I can add that cache manager into sequencer. And if I plus time, start time, I can now command this, and you can see that I can have control over my simulation. That means that I no longer need my field once I'm happy with the simulation, and that I can set this up to 5. It's usually 5. The beginning is 0 and the end is usually 5. That means that it is at a rate of 30 frames per second. 5 times 30 is going to go into 150. That means that I need to keyframe 0 here, and I need to keyframe 5 here to get the exact same result, but without simulating in our world. That one was a little late on the draw. It's 1 here and 5 at the end, I'm gonna guess. Let's see. Nope, still a little late on the draw. So, you know, you gotta make sure that you figure out this one and where it matches perfectly. But the cool thing is that from here we have actual full control over where that simulation is going to be, because now it's cached. And the cool thing about this, check this out, we can send it back to being built up now that we have it cached. And we can create some sort of effect like this, which is pretty cool too. So now that we have all of this, we now have it cached. It's no longer simulating, and we now know how a character can go through a fracture simulation and have it cached in sequence. So let's do one more thing before we go, which is the time dilation track. Now this track, once we activate it, it's going to go through the entire set, which is not what we want, through the entire shot. We want it to be in a specific point. So let's have it right here. And what we need to do is right click on it. It's up here at the top. And we are going to go to Edit, Trim Left. And then let's say I want to go up to this point. I'm going to right click, edit, trim right. And now it's only going to affect that section there. But as of right now, it's set to 1. So if we set this to 0.2, we'll get this. And that's it for today's tutorial. Hope you enjoyed. As always, put your questions down in the comments. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.